Hello and welcome to the CDO interview series. My name's Andy Park. I am Vice President, co-founder of TeamCentral, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Alexis Normand, the CEO and co-founder of Greenly. Welcome, Alexis.
I'm very happy to be with you guys today. Hi.
Hi. So tell me a little bit about yourself and what Greenly does.
Sure. So I'm, as you said, the COO, co-founder of Greenly. I'm 40, father of two daughters. Essentially, what I'm pushing for on a day-to-day basis is for any business, whatever its size, even small and medium-sized businesses, to start their climate strategy. And there's nothing that can be improved unless you measure it. But in that sense, tracking your emissions has so far been quite hard for companies. They've seen it as a big, consulting project that would cost a lot of money and so on. And so our mission is to make that as simple and as intuitive as possible, and also extremely affordable, so that basically any business, even 10 people business, can start its climate journey. And about myself, just in a few words. So I've been in the tracking industry for about 10 years now. Before creating Greenly, I was actually working in digital health. I was leading the Boston office of an IoT company and helping, patients better track their health metrics so that health systems could generate alerts and get people with diabetes or heart problems in check before they got hospitalized. So I've seen firsthand that you could generate short-term incentives, short-term savings, so make a system more efficient by providing the right data at the right time, at the right cost. And basically, as a personal move, I pivoted from digital health to decarbonization, but bringing with me all that I had learned, building this tech.
That's really very interesting. So what was your inspiration for Greenly? And I'm interested in the name as well.
Sure. So the company is still called Withings or Whitings. So it's it's this idea that you if you want to keep your weight in check, or if you want to lose weight, you have to step on a scale every day. And it's actually the single most effective way to stabilize your weight. But this is true of many things. And it's true of your carbon footprint as well. So we're in a world that is obese with too much greenhouse gas emissions, GHG emissions. And the only way to bring it down is for people to know where they stand and have a plan, basically, for reducing it. And I think beyond the difficulty of, beyond the fact that we ease the difficulty of starting the journey of starting the measurement, we also need to convince people that it's not something they have to do in direct contradiction with their business objectives. So, it needs to be seamless. It needs to be easy. You need to track your emissions easily. You need to have a plan. But at the end of the day, it's not. It shouldn't be a trade-off between your business and the planet. Both needs to align. And that's, I think, a fundamental proposal. What we're seeing from our almost 1,000 customers now is usually they start their climate journey because they realize it's their short-term and their long-term interest to position themselves on this key issue here.
So changes, you mentioned changing people's minds. Change is difficult for most people. What challenges have you experienced in trying to convince people that this is an important concept and philosophy around, reducing carbon footprint, and what keeps you motivated?
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. I think everybody kind of agrees that it's an important topic, and nobody wants to live in a world where you have more and more climate crisis and your kids basically. So I think people agree on principle. and that's easy to do. But then you have to, get to second base, which is, okay, now that you agree, what are you going to do about it? And so doing that is about like saying, well, it needs to happen now and not like in 5 years or in 10 years. And I think, when we're talking to business owners, they sure want the world to be saved, but they also have people to pay, and maybe, times can be hard, etc. So I think it's very much about convincing them that it's not just a long-term objectives, but it's a short-term objectives with short-term advantages. And I see a few of them. And very often it's not, we didn't like make them up. Our work is more about finding people who are already convinced, faster, and getting them to be our ambassadors. But so when we ask these guys, why are you doing it? Well, you have people who are, creating a product that is already a greener alternative. So let's say you're making shoes and their footprint is much better than, the big brands out there. Well, then they want to prove it. So they have to have a third party, vetting basically their strategy. So that's one use case. You want to prove to end consumers that so it's your business interest. You want to replace the high polluting sneakers, with greener alternatives. That's one use case. Second use case, very, very common use case, is you've got a company who is a supplier to a large company, and that large company has made a public pledge. So, like Apple is saying we're going to go carbon neutral in 2030 or 50 or whatever, and Microsoft and so on. So when these large companies realize that they have set such an ambitious goal, they also end up understanding that they have to push their objective down their supply chain. So the footprint, of Apple is basically a lot of their Chinese manufacturers. So if Apple wants to be carbon neutral and everyone is China is running on coal energy and polluting the world, it doesn't work. So the only way for Apple to get to its objective is to ask its suppliers to reduce their emissions. And so we address these guys. They come to us and they say, look, I've got this big customer. If I want to stay in business, I need to have a plan. And maybe I'm a 100 employee company or 500, and I've never done this. Where do I start? Well, they need a QuickBooks basically for carbon accounting. So that's where we come in. And so the business reason for starting it is usually business. And then if you're in a sector where you need to recruit a lot of people, it becomes important, especially if you're recruiting younger graduates, to show that you care about these topics. I don't know if you see this among, maybe your kids or people coming out of college. Well, who wants to work for oil and gas now? I mean, if you're somewhat informed about climate change, then it's like a cynical view of things to do, unless the oil and gas company rebrands itself as an energy company and has a strategy of saying, yes, today we're in oil and gas, but we understand the world is changing, and we are going to pivot to greener energy and so on. So in this case, they can still attract talent, and they need to prove that they're doing it. So these guys need to showcase, disclose their ambition. So short summary, key takeaway is working for climate change doesn't have to be a sacrifice. It needs to align with companies' business objectives.
So you told me a little bit about the type of customers that you work with based on their unique scenarios. And when you were talking about these larger companies that have made a statement, a position in the world, and then that policy trickles down to their suppliers, it sounded very much like EDI back in the day with the Walmarts and the big, big box retailers that, really pushed EDI requirements down their supply chain. And that makes a lot of sense to me. Can you tell me a little bit about a typical customer implementation, what that looks like, about how long it takes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I love your EDI example because it's the type of data we use to fast track carbon footprinting. We integrate with software basically to fast track the data collection. But so we have two type of customers. We have the Walmarts of this world who have the basically the strategy of pushing their objectives down the supply chain. So we work with their purchasing departments and we integrate with their purchasing softwares like EDI and so on. And then we scan every expense. We have an AI that essentially recognizes suppliers, and then we have a ton of data on supplier categories or suppliers, individual supplier footprint if they disclosed it, and it just keeps getting better. And so we tell them what the priority is. And then they can reach out to these suppliers and say, hey, guys, what have you done? And so that's the stick. But the suppliers also have a carrot, which is to say, if you guys are transparent, if you are doing stuff, well, then you'll be like in a directory of virtuous suppliers. And then all our purchasing director or procurement departments will see who the best alternatives are. So these are the enterprise customers at procurement level. But then the larger business cases are the SMBs, the suppliers themselves. So these guys, basically, typical carbon footprint disclosure and strategy would be something like a 5 to 10K deal, okay? And it would take them in total number of hours worked, something like 4 to 8 maximum. So it's like, but it's often spread out over a few weeks because, and then there's a journey, it's task management. So basically you need to check all the boxes till you have enough info to analyze that data and then produce a carbon footprint report and then produce some action plan recommendations. So the data is you sync with your ERP or accounting software. And we have integrations with QuickBooks, Xero, FreshBooks, you name it, SAP, etc. Then that scans everything. We ask a few questions about activity-based data. How much electricity have you consumed? How much gas have you burned? And this you can either insert manually or you can integrate with like utility meters and stuff like that. So you have a first, and then you need sometimes to, or very often, to survey your employees. How are you coming to work? If you're with your big SUV or you're commuting with public transportation, doesn't have the same footprint impact, or if you stay at home. So it's different. So basically you check all these boxes. That's a couple of hours. And then that's enough to publish a report. But very often you realize that dependent on the industry, that there's a big bucket where if you want to be good at recommending, a decarbonization plan, you need more data. So say a tech company, you quickly realize that based on their expenses, most of their footprint would be, say, their cloud. So cloud is basically you're paying AWS or Google or Azure, and these guys, they're consuming data, they're storing, they're computing, and you have just running on electricity. And so this you can integrate with their costing APIs. You have a per instance, per minute level electricity consumption that you can compute based on that data. And then you link this to wherever the data is. And it could be in Alaska or it could be in Kansas. In one case, a kilowatt hour is like 30 grams of CO2. And in another, it's 500 grams. So basically, you can take a deep dive into a company's largest emission source or category. And then you can really like have activity-based data that allows this company to have super detailed recommendation. Move your data so that you enjoy greener energy, or use this instance rather than this one, or use this instance when the workload, etc., etc. So I gave you the cloud example, but we do the same for retailers with Shopify-like integrations. We do it for industry. So it's very industry we have industry custom apps, basically. And that's what allows you to be both super precise and scale this to a lot of businesses. So end of the day, and sorry if I talk too much, well, you have your report, you have your PDF, and then you have your strategy, and then it's a Kanban board type of things where you assign owners and you track that you have progress. And if you have progress, you're not just disclosing your footprint, you're net zero certified down the line. You're proving that the trend is going down.
I think that's very interesting. I heard you talk a lot about energy consumption, green energy versus carbon emission, producing energy. How much of this process that you take a customer through is specific to how you're spending, either using energy, spending money on supplies that aren't cognizant of their footprint, or compared to a policy around personal choices around vehicles and LEED in the US we have LEED certified buildings that are energy efficient and so forth. How much of it is kind of policy and philosophy versus practice?
No, for sure. I mean, decarbonization is a complex topic because some of it depends on your personal choices or your corporate choices, and some of them are essentially a function of your environment. If you live in a country where all the energy is gas or coal, your only option is to consume less, right? Energy. So being more efficient, using less electricity, or using suppliers that consume less energy and so on. But there's also a world where you can consume just as much energy, if not more. But this energy is much less carbon intensive. So, you could basically double your output, but if you switch from coal to, wind or solar or something else, nuclear, well then, so it's really always those two levers. Am I consuming less energy, or am I using more efficient energy? And this is true across the board. It's true for what we call your direct emissions. So direct emissions is what comes out of your car or comes out of your factory. It's the smoke you see, basically in your buildings or in your machines, coming out of your machines. And so this is typically one of, do I use less energy, or do I change my machines so they're more efficient, or do I change my car? Do I buy a Tesla because, there's less smoke coming out? Then you have what you call your scope 2. So your indirect emissions linked to energy. So it's basically your utility provider. So can I choose somebody who has a better policy on green energy? And then you have what you call your scope 3. So it's basically everything else. So it's supply chain, is your purchase of goods and services. It's your freight, how you ship your goods. It's your employee commute. It's all those things. So for all these categories, you need to say, okay, what do I focus on? Because I can't do everything at once. I have a strategy. And you
can actually help them with the strategy. You can actually help them with the strategy, not just the data collection and analysis. Is that right?
Yeah, because the analysis ties into the strategy, because you can't do everything. It's better to focus on 3 projects and make them happen than 50 things that you could be doing. And the 3 projects, it has to focus on your largest emission source. So once you understand what that is, and that's quite industry specific. So if you're Walmart, or Amazon, your emissions are your suppliers. It's what you buy and sell. So then your action plan is basically, how do I nudge my suppliers into doing better? Maybe I rank them. Maybe I tell consumers that this product is better than this one, and maybe some of them are willing to pay more for a greener product. So it's signaling. But if you're a tech company, it could be how you process your data. I mentioned that already. If you're a news company, then it's how you process your data as well. So you're like a digital company. So it's about prioritizing and then finding alternatives, energy alternatives or supplier alternatives. Last example on like you have an inventory, you're buying computers, you're buying phones, headsets, and so on. There can be a 3x difference between two phones in terms of carbon footprint. So if you want to lower your carbon footprint on the IT side, all you need to do is be mindful of which phone manufacturer is doing a better job. So it's choices like this, but there are so many choices that you can make that at the end of the day, you need to focus on your biggest source. Don't count your Nespresso capsules right away. First, try and figure out if it's your plane or if it's your manufacturing plant or if it's your data centers that it's consuming the most.
Last question, and then I'd love to just open it up and have you share, one last thought about Greenly, if there's anything you'd like to share. You mentioned net zero certification. Does your organization also help guide companies to get that net zero certification?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe just to define what net zero is. So net zero is the moment in time when essentially there are as many emissions worldwide as they are emissions being captured by offsetted, nature-based or carbon capture projects. So, but today, enough offset projects around to capture all the global emissions. Otherwise, this whole business about climate change would already have been solved. So when organizations tend to say that they are carbon neutral, it could hint, there could be a big suspicion that they are greenwashing. So having a carbon neutral certificate is very often misleading. So, for instance, the Qatar World Cup right now that's starting says it's carbon neutral. It's not carbon neutral because it's emitting a huge amount of emissions and it's not offsetting, even 5% of its emissions. But so we prefer the term net zero, and we're not the only one. I think John Oliver recently in the news explained that little difference. So net zero is you measure, you reduce, and then you offset. So you're on track to reduce your emissions because that's what the world needs. And that's basically what you need to do as a organization mindful of this. So we provide that certification. We help companies disclose their emissions. We set them on a reduction trajectory and we help them offset. But it's not like I measure, I offset, problem solved. That is actually a risky thing to say if you're talking to consumers or customers out there, because it might be counterproductive, really.
Excellent answer. Thank you, Alexis. Any last thoughts you had for us about Greenly?
Yeah, so Greenly, we're a US-based organization. We have offices in London, in Paris as well. I happen to come out of France, but I know that the war against climate change will be won in the US, because if the US starts to scale this, then the whole world will adopt it. So we have just about 1,000 customers right now, and I think it's a battle that is won step by step, and with people setting examples and then taking their whole industry along with them. So when an industry leader starts to do this, then it sets a new standard and everybody follows, and you have these very virtuous circles that start to kick in. So we're here to facilitate that, and of course you guys are helping me today spread the good word.
Alexis, thank you so much for your time. Wonderful story, and I wish you all the success in the world. For more video series, please visit cdomagazine.tech. And thank you. Very nice to meet you, Alex.
I was very happy to discuss with you today, Andrew. Thanks.
Take care.